All right, hello. Welcome to Artificially Intelligent, the show where a black Afro-American person of color musician and a white cracker-ass hunky comedian talk about all things life. That is Barrett Antar Goodwin. I am Nathan Timmel. What's that?
You call me a white cracker-ass comedian?
I'm beginning the show by insulting you. Yes, you cracker-ass hunky. We are recording on April 21st. It's a Wednesday. I just squinted, which means I'm getting old. I don't know if you caught that. I went like this, like, oh Christ, my eyes are going.
You're like this. You're like,
yeah. My wife caught me doing that with the menu the other day and just started mocking me. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Anyway, it's
why everybody thinks that they're not going to age.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to do that one day.
Just because I got a couple of years on you doesn't mean you're not going to catch up to me.
You'll get here. Don't worry.
So the Derek Chauvin jury came in yesterday, and the verdict was handed down: guilty, guilty, guilty.
Mm-hmm.
And just going off what I've been experiencing since that happened last night, let's jump in right there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to use the word most. I'm not going to say all, because that it would be incorrect. I'm going to say most. Mm-hmm. Most of my white friends seem to be saying, yay, life can go back to normal. We got him. And most of my black friends seem to be saying, okay, this is a good start, but now let's move forward. You, speaking for all black people, as you get to do because you are black.
Once Obama was retiring from presidency, they elected me to speak for all black people.
For all black people, what are your thoughts on just that? And then we can go from there. Just on the white people be thinking and black people be thinking. And I would like to point this out. I very quickly before I forget. Because I am a horrible person, I did think of a joke yesterday, just like I thought of a joke on 9/11. My joke on 9/11, I thought was, wow, Osama bin Laden's really trying to impress Jodie Foster.
Jesus Christ.
I know.
But like 3 people are going to get that.
I know, but that's why I'm a failed comedian, because I do references that are so obscure.
Well, it's not even obscure. It just takes a certain amount of cultural knowledge.
Yeah. Well, the joke I thought of yesterday was, I'm not even sure if it's a joke. Just as the verdict was handed down and I saw, the reactions, I'm like, wow, black people really have range. They will celebrate when a murderer like OJ goes free and when a murderer like Chauvin gets convicted. It's like, that's range. You celebrate both ends of it.
Oh, God.
Not much of a punchline there, but enough to get me in trouble.
I mean, you get kicked in the neck. You walk down the road, some random person come kick you in the neck and be like, that's for that shit you said on your podcast.
Someone would have to watch the podcast first, or the vodcaster. Okay, going back to how this started, though. Most of my white friends are like, yay, move on with life. And a lot of my black friends are like, okay, now let's continue this process going forward. This is not a one and done. I tend to fall in the it's not a one and done category. I'm like, good, I'm glad he got convicted, but now let's try and branch out from here.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts about it. I don't even know where to begin because,
how about your thoughts? I mean, I just said that I tend to fall on this is not a one and done. Where do you just begin with just you before you start speaking for all black people?
I think it's really cool that it happened. I don't think there was a choice in the matter. I don't know that he might just not be the sacrificial lamb to make everybody relax for a minute.
Yeah.
Right? You throw a handful of people in jail for doing some stuff. You start bringing some people up on review and things like that. But I think that the problem is much deeper than one person killing one person, right? It's like, that's not what we're talking about, right? That's an expression of the problem, but that's not the problem. Does that make sense?
It does. I like the way you phrased that. That's an expression of the problem. The problem allows for this outcome.
Right. Exactly.
And putting him away
Absolutely
is just acknowledgement of that one instance, but not the overall problem.
Right. Like if we keep it, like if you have mice in your house and you just go, "Oh, I got rid of a mouse today." It's like, well, that doesn't deal with the ones that are living in your walls. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and how many traps can you put out before you have to fucking clean up your house, get all the food scraps off the floor, stop leaving plates in your bedroom, and all that shit that would attract them? You know what I mean? Like, there comes a point where you have to like actually do something actively in your world to stop the mice from coming in. And part of that is like, I get it's like it's a fucked up scenario, right? When people go, well, why did he resist? Why did he and stuff like that? And I'm like, for the same reason that she shot him, right? Because
Are we
what that
switching
woman,
cases here?
well, yes, because I mean, yeah, I mean, they're all the same to me. Like
Okay.
they're not all the same, but they're all
I
the
know,
same.
but people watching might get confused for a second.
Right,
Like, wait a second, she shot who? This
right.
is Chauvin. I know what you're talking about. The
Okay,
Minneapolis,
the other
another
Minneapolis
shooting in
person, right?
Minneapolis.
So, but what happens is like if you're a cop and all you watch is videos, and I have friends, I have black friends who are cops, and I say things to them like, oh well, you know, it's different when you pull over a black person or whatever. They're like, it's not different. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, listen, we're trained that every incident, you're one incident away from somebody having to go deliver a message to your family. Like
Right.
they constantly get this message that there's no such thing as a random traffic stop, that everything is deadly, that every person's trying to kill you and everybody's out to get you. And that's how they're trained. And we seem to think that that's okay. You know, like we seem to think that that's a reasonable way for them to do this, you know? And it's like, well, I understand the logistics of it, right? Like I understand it's like when back in the day, I don't know, what are we on? What wave of feminism are we on now?
I,
I was this third wave, fourth wave, I don't know. Like first wave was this shit where they're like, we want to vote, we want to have good paying jobs and whatever, right? Then there's a second wave. There's something that happened like in the 90s and the early 2000s where it was like every man is a potential rapist. And it's like, well, yes, sure. From a certain perspective,
if you break it down far enough,
right?
yes.
Like, well, like every man has the potential to rape someone, right? Sure. Okay, I'll accept that. But that's like every woman can pick up a knife and stab someone, or every
Right.
mother can kill her
You
kid, or do you mean
well, you
you
don't want to walk through life just, I mean, one, you keep your antenna up and your radar on, yes, but I think there's a difference between awareness and flinching, like,
yeah, well there's a difference between caution and fear.
and paranoia. Yeah.
Right, they're not the same thing. Like being cautious, like, oh, well, I'm out on a first date with this guy. I'm only gonna have a drink. I'm not gonna go back to his place. I'll park right in front of the club or the restaurant so I can, or I'll valet my car so that someone will bring it right back to me. Like there's precautions
Right.
you can take that's just caution, a precaution, right? Makes perfect sense. It's not pre-paranoia, it's precaution, right? It's a different thing. And my problem is that there seems to be a lack of understanding that when I grew up, I would mouth off to cops all day. I had a crazy sense of entitlement as a kid. Crazy sense of entitlement.
Do you
I would
think
get pulled
we've
over.
talked about this? Do you think that's just a matter of being young? Like when you're young, you're dumb?
I think it was different. I think it was different. I feel like when I and not to quote the Republicans and all this, oh, you used to be able to tell a joke, right? You used to be able to call a guy a faggot and it was okay, and we can't say nigger and it was okay, and why can't I say that now? It's like, oh my God, you're a douche, right?
Right.
But there is a sense where, like, when I was a kid, somebody would be like, somebody said this once to me, he says, what's your name? I said, Antar. He goes, no, what's your real name? Not your nigger name. And I was like, oh, fuck off, dickhead. He
Wow.
goes, I know, I'm just kidding. And he was serious, but when I like stepped to him and said something, he just backed off. And it was like just a word, and he said it. And I stood up and I said, fuck off. And he backed off. And we're not friends. Like he and I never became friends, but it wasn't something that had to be, he didn't mean it in the way that it would have been meant in 1865.
I,
Right?
I don't. It sounds like he did to me. I have no
Oh,
idea
because
that,
he
but
was just being a dick. He was just
yeah.
being a dick in front of his friends. Like I
Oh, okay.
some of them, and he was just being an asshole, showing off. It's kind of like when I was a kid, like I was showing off for my friends, and I pushed this other kid's bike in the bush, in the sticker bushes, like ha ha.
Yeah.
And all my friends were like, "Oh, look at that!" And he felt stupid, and I felt good about myself. But I didn't hate the kid. It was nothing to do. It didn't have anything to do with him. It had everything to do with me wanting to impress people. Right? It's not has nothing to do with him. He's just again, he's just a symptom. He was the express my actions that got expressed on him, but it was an expression of my insecurity, not an expression of my hatred towards him. This guy had no hatred towards me, no malice, no anything. He's just trying to be funny, and it just wasn't funny.
Okay.
It didn't land because it was just too aggressive for it to actually be funny to anyone. And when I told him fuck off, then everybody laughed, and they laughed at him. And then he was like, I'm sorry, I'm just, And I was like, whatever, dude, we're not friends. But I didn't have a need to punch him in his throat. You know what I mean? There was no need for that. I was just like, whatever, dude, you're an idiot, right? But I would get pulled over. This is back before like I even knew what weed smelled like. You know what I mean? I was like 18 years old, never been high, never been drunk, never any of that stuff.
Isn't it amazing how sheltered we were? Like now, I think kids know about drugs and are aware of a lot of these things.
I was a yeah. I think that it's just all over the place. When we were kids, it wasn't everywhere. Like I had friends who would smoke some weed every now and then, but like you had to go to the shadiest parts of
Yeah.
our nearby us to get it. And half the time it was swag, and they'd rip you off. They say, okay, here, give me the money. You wait here, I'll come back. And it's fucking, I'd be sitting in the car with my asshole friends, and I'd be like, what are you guys doing? We're just waiting for him to come back. I'm like, he's not coming back,
Yeah.
right?
He's gone.
Right, he's gone. He's gone, and he took your $15. That's how this went, right? No, you'll see. And I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna put the seat back and listen to the radio while you assholes get ripped off. You know what I mean?
20 minutes later, is he coming back yet?
Right. I'm like, right, exactly. It's just like, or you get a bag of oregano or tea. It's just nonsense. It's just ridiculous. But I remember getting pulled over. They pulled me over for some bullshit thing. Oh, we saw you weaving in and out of the lines. No, you didn't. Because I got my glasses on and I could see you in that space in that empty parking lot with your headlights on from 100 yards. So I promise you I saw you and I was not doing any of that stuff. Well, maybe you just got nervous and flinched a little bit and that's why you're driving crazy. I'm like, no, but okay. So they take me out of the
Okay,
car.
say I got nervous and flinched a little. Why did you pull me over then? Because there's nothing wrong with me if you say I'm nervous.
Exactly. Right. So they would take me out of the car, empty out the trunk, empty out everything in the back seat, open up the glove compartment, open up all the stuff, throw all the stuff on the floor of the car or on the sidewalk, and like look for stuff that my dad smoked a pipe. I'd be in his car. They'd be like, "What is this?" I'm like, "What does it look like?" Looks like the kind of pipe Sherlock Holmes would smoke. Smell it. Does it smell like tobacco? Yep. Then what the fuck do you think it is in a car registered to my goddamn father? What do you think it is then? Tell me. What do you think I'm doing with my dad's pipe? You know what I mean? And they would throw all the stuff on the ground, yell and scream at me. I would yell and scream back at them, tell them they're assholes and do you know my father's a lawyer and I'm gonna all that, and I would do all this
Shit
stuff.
they don't care about.
And I was never afraid for my life. Not once was I afraid for my life, no matter where I was. Rough neighborhood. But I never hung out in crazy rough neighborhoods. But I was never afraid for my life. They give me some 4-point ticket. It was bullshit. I'd have to go to court, argue down to 2. My insurance was sky high for stuff that was not reasonable. But I was not afraid for my life. Right? Now, the amount of videos I've seen of Black people getting blown away by police officers, even if it's 10 parts per million, right? You know what I mean? Like, it almost is irrelevant because the amount of consistency that I see it happen, it has created a remarkable fear in me of police. So if I get pulled over and the cops seem fidgety and they are pulling me out of the car, I'm going to be terrified. And I'm going to start saying things like, I have a family, and, like the way you talk to a serial killer.
Right.
My name is, and I've got a family, and these people love me, and I'm a human being, because I'm literally terrified, even though I know, statistically speaking, I have nothing to be afraid of, or very little to be afraid of, statistically speaking. But realistically, in my mind, I'm terrified because some white guy's got his hand on his gun while asking me what my name is. I'm like, why's your hand on your gun, dude? My hand's on like this, 10 and 2. Like, what? You're looking in my car, the window's down, the radio's off, like your partner's on the other window, that window's down too. My wallet, my shit is all either on my dashboard, or I ask, do you mind if I reach into the thing and get it? But normally I'll just whip it out. I think you might have said something to me about that at some point, and I
Oh,
not
yeah, because first thing I do is dome light on. I got pulled
right,
over twice
exactly,
last year, once on New Year's Eve, but yeah, it's like
right.
the
It's
instant
like,
I'm pulling over, my dome light goes on. I
yeah,
make sure before I've stopped that I've got everything out, and then I just sit there. And I'm a white guy doing this. I
right.
just sit there waiting for them.
I do all that stuff, and yet there's a hand on the gun, and
Yeah.
there's another partner looking in the window, and they're all like, "Where are you going with?" And I'm like, "Whoa, dude," you know what I mean? And I'm
Well,
like,
let me ask you this, because I have a thought. So are you're comparing in my head the every man is a rapist to now every cop is a potential could kill you? Is that what you're saying?
well,
I
what
mean, is that the segue you were trying to make, or the
I mean,
comparison?
a little bit, but at the same time, but I think cops are trained the same way,
Yeah.
and they're
Yeah,
given
well, absolutely, because we've heard about that training. Well, let me interrupt then. I apologize before I lose my train of thought, because everything you're telling me brings me to my favorite subject, the media, which I hate, because the media is about fear. And again, it goes to the difference between awareness and paranoia. And I'm not saying you're being paranoid. We've seen enough to know that you're being, if there's a way to say this, logically paranoid.
right, sure.
Um, that said, what you said about 1 in 10 million chance of it happening, or 1 in 10, whatever the astronomical odds are, everyone thinks it's going to be them. That's just our ego. Like,
Absolutely.
you know me, I'm not anti-vaccination, but every year when I get a flu shot, I do go, shit, I hope this doesn't make me paralyzed. I mean,
Right,
I
right.
say
It's
a
gonna
little prayer,
happen to
like,
somebody. Just might just you just hope one don't want it to be you. Right.
yeah, it's you and I both have a greater chance of getting in a car accident or slipping on a bar of soap than we do a vaccination mishap. Or, I mean, what's the one right now with Johnson and Johnson? 6 people out of 7 million, and they're freaking out. Anyway, so it's the media, and this ties in with this morning. The headlines today, I don't know if you saw this. I saw 4 or 5 of them because I went searching. Once I saw it trending on Twitter, it's police, and they didn't say white or black police, but they say police kill a young 16-year-old black girl, shot her dead. And you're like, oh, Jesus Christ, here we go. So you click on the story, and it's the police were called because this woman was running, this kid was running around with a knife out of her, I don't know, out of her mind, trying to stab people. And the police said, drop the knife. And she tried to stab a police officer, and boom, boom, shot dead. And that's every story says that this girl had a knife, was either stabbing people or trying to stab people. She tried to stab the cop. She got shot. But every headline just says police shoot 16-year-old black girl. And it's just shitty. I mean, it's the sensationalistic headline and then the realistic story behind it. Did she deserve to die? Could they have tased her? Who knows? This goes into what you said about training. Like, first thing is go for the gun, bang, bang. Every person could potentially end an officer's life. But just the disparity between the headline of fear and the police are out to get you, and the reality, which is it happens rarely, but we make a big deal out of each one. And in some cases, absolutely a big deal. Like the Chauvin one, a huge deal needed to be made out of that. But everything can't be a 10. Everything can't be the Chauvin case. But I think that's what the media tries to do, is try and make every headline to scare the shit out of us and
I
put you in that fight or flight mode, just as the cops are trained to be in fight or flight. And then you
absolutely.
mix the two, and we're fucked, civilians
Well,
and police
it's
officers.
interesting that you use the fight or flight term, because let's see. Here's my problem, right? And we'll go backwards a little bit to go forward. I feel like your basal ganglia, right, in your mind, right, what you call me, right? Now, your basal ganglia controls your fight, flight, freeze response, right? It's what we call our lizard brain, I believe. Don't quote me on this. I'm obviously not a brain surgeon, but the lizard brain. But I believe it's the basal ganglia, and I believe it's in the limbic system, the limbic region, which handles all that kind of stuff, right?
I'm going to be nodding and agreeing with you. I'm going to mute myself. It sounds like my water heater just kicked on, and there's probably that's getting picked up by the mic that I don't want to have.
I can't hear it at all, but okay. But regardless, your lizard brain, oldest part of your brain, right? And the brain didn't evolve in a way that like it outgrew things and got better, smarter. That's not what happened. It's the lizard brain is still the foundation that everything is built on. It's still there. There's just workarounds and workups. It wasn't like that thing was ever gotten rid of, right?
So what we talked about with Jordan Peterson last week, I believe.
Right. Yeah. Now, in this country, if this country's a person, its lizard brain, let's say, is one that is highly attuned to a kind of supremacist ethic as it comes to white and black people, and a kind of fear as it comes to black people, right? Tons of the literature that was printed about black people was about how scary they are and how they deserve to be treated like this and how they're not like this and they're not children of God. And this went on for hundreds of years, right? It is just woven into the fabric of what made this country what it is. I'm not going to argue whether or not the country started in 1619 or 1776 or whatever the fuck. It's none of that. That's not the point. The point is that our cultural roots go back. We were like, let's say, let me put it like this. We have been what we're dealing with now is a problem, and it was a problem maybe as of the 50s, right? It was considered a real problem, right? Like cops killing black people, but the only people who cared about it were black people, right? This whole idea of large groups of white people caring about white cops killing black people is like a new thing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right? I'm not saying that there weren't a ton of abolitionists who were white people, because there obviously were. There are tons of people, churches, things, institutions that were like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong.
Right. But we're at a point where we've Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point. I mean, there are always good people and there are always bad people. And then I think I would guess that there were a lot of just ambivalent people, which is in a way evil, but it was more, well, that's not happening. Don't have to think about it. It's not that they enjoyed it or liked it or haha, take that. Just out of sight, out of mind. But now we are at a point of awareness.
And basically what happened when they killed Emmett Till, right? They beat the shit out of Emmett Till and beat him to death for a lie, right? The woman, after all the white dudes who beat him to death died, she decided to confess. Like, oh, I lied and they killed him and I'm sorry. Like, oh, you could have said that 40 years ago, 50 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But she didn't, right? And we see things like that. And when white people saw that picture in the newspaper, their thought, I've heard this from...
Which picture? The Emmett Till hanging?
The Emmett Till just beating the funeral picture. His mother told the morticians not to fix his face up.
Yeah. I know which one you're talking about.
Like what he looked like. Yeah. And it was like, oh my God. And people were like, listen, we don't like the coloreds, but this is a bit too far. Yeah. That was the initial attitude. They're like, listen, we're okay with them living here and us living here. We're okay with the schools being separate, but this is too much for us. And that's kind of what George Floyd is like. He's like a modern day Emmett Till. It's like people seem to be okay with it. They're just like, that's too much, right? That's too far. The rest of the stuff seems to...
Jake said this, which I think was interesting. When it first happened, he said, if not for that video, you would hear stories like, oh, he had his knee on his neck for 9 minutes. And you'd be like, 9 minutes. Come on. That's a fish is this big story. Like, it's got to be exaggerated. But no, I am using this word incorrectly, so forgive me. The good thing is there is video. I mean, because then there is no the fish is this big story. You see the knee for 9 minutes.
Right.
And yeah, so I agree with everything you're saying.
When cops have cameras and everybody has cameras, like, well, all right, let me just move backwards again. So my thought is this: and this is what I would like for people to acknowledge, and this is what needs to be dealt with. And I think it is ultimately these days. I think it is being dealt with, but I think we don't understand that for people over 30, 32, 3, 4, 5, somewhere in that range, our impression of race is very different than 18-year-olds' impression of race, right? The average, you'll see some 18-year-olds that have, like, I have students who have like trans friends and gay friends and don't think anything of it. So when somebody goes, "Oh, so-and-so's a faggot," I'm like, stop. Well, that's one of my friends. What are you talking about? Like, there's a real ethic of like being friends with gay people, being friends with trans people, being friends with people of all different races and this stuff. People don't seem to care these days. Like, they don't care, like young people don't care in the way that they did when we were kids. Do you know what I mean? Like, when we were kids, I had lots of friends, but it sounds funny to say, but like gay people had the sense not to tell anyone they were gay. Not in a mean way, but they just didn't want to get beat up. And
well, they knew that was an exclusionary term.
Right. They just didn't say anything about it until they were much later. Then I was like, later, your friend would go, all those stories I told you about when I was fucking girls? Well, those were dudes. You're like, oh, fascinating. You know what I mean? And you're like, oh. And then they'll say something like, "Don't worry, I'm not trying to fuck you." I'm like, never thought you were.
Yeah.
Not even now. Like, okay, cool. Now you're my friend still who just happens to be gay. But
I'm a little hurt that you aren't. Anyway, sorry.
I'm a little offended you don't want to fuck me, but still.
Are you saying I'm fat? Is that what you're saying? Are you saying I'm fat? By the way, I realized 10 minutes into our conversation that I'm the white guy wearing the white shirt and you're the black guy wearing the black shirt. We should.
Want to change shirts real quick?
Next week, I'll wear a black shirt. You wear a white one. It's just very.
But I think that what we need to deal with is that there's, like, I heard some senator on Fox say, well, if they're arguing that cops are afraid of black people, look at the crime stats and look at the media, look at the stuff we see, black people doing this and black people doing this. There's a reason why people are afraid of them. And I'm like, but by that logic, that's the same reason black people are afraid of police officers, is because of this, because of the numbers.
Well, and that,
see, you know what I mean? It's like, there's this thing that happens where white people's fear of black people is supposed to be completely understandable, and black people's fear of white people is, what? Why would you be afraid of us? But
given what you just said about Emmett Till, why wouldn't there be an inherent fear of?
I mean, I remember once, like, I'd walk by dozens of cars and heard the doors locked. Right in the grocery store, going to the supermarket, I'll pull my car up next to some fucking white dude's hoopty. Like, do you know what a hoopty is? Do white people use this term?
I don't remember. Yeah, I used to. I know the term, but
like a piece of shit car, right? We call it a hoopty, right? So some white dude pulls up in his hoopty, and I'll pull up in a nicer car, and he'll look at my car and look at his car, and he'll lock his doors. I'm like, please. It's just, And so once I got out, I was on the road. I was going to some gig in Connecticut somewhere, and I pulled up to get a glass of water and go to the bathroom, get a bottle of water. I wanted to go to the bathroom. So I went inside this place and I bought a big bottle of water, which seems
so that you could have to go to the bathroom again in the future.
Right. I was just like, oh yeah, maybe that's not the right move. But so I went to the bathroom, bought some water, and there was all these like white women sitting outside having like brunch or something. And I look at them, and I look at my car, and I go, boop, and hit the button on the car, and they went, they were like all offended. And they were like all four of them, like all huffy and puffy. I'm like, and I was like, oh, that's hilarious.
That's fantastic, especially if you did it really acting like, look at them, look at your car, look at them.
That's exactly what that's exactly what happened. And they were furious and offended, but yet I'll get out of the car, humming, earbuds on, like I'm a whistler.
Like, okay, wait a second. If you have earbuds and you're whistling, how do you hear them locking their car doors? I'm calling hijinks on your.
Okay, because you could see the lights
I
flash.
know I'm fucking with you.
You could hear it. But even if like it's not even the headphones. It's like I get out of the car and I'm just like in a good mood. I'm like generally like, you know. So I'm getting out of the car and I see somebody lock their doors when they see me, and I'm like, all right, I don't want to take that personally because maybe they just forgot to lock their doors and they turned around and locked the door and happened. And I'm like, whatever. Like I
They
don't
forgot
want
to lock their car door. You're the reminder. You remind people to
I just
lock their.
reminded them to lock their car door, right? And maybe they would have done it if it was anybody, right? Like maybe just any person. And so this is where it gets funny, right? Like, because I will admit that many of the things in my life, in my history, that I found to be racist were just assholes.
Yeah.
They were just assholes. It had nothing to do with my black, or if it had anything to do with my blackness, it's the same thing they're going to do to somebody else because they're fat, or someone else because they're too skinny, or someone else because they're too tall, someone else because they're too short. So maybe they're targeting my blackness, but they're going to target you for something else and do the same thing to you.
Right.
It's just whatever excuse they use, and race just happens to be the sliding board they slide down into the fuckery they're going to visit upon me somehow, right? But for you, it'd be something, oh, well, he's taller than me, so fuck him, and I'm going to, whatever, I don't know, right? Whatever the stupid reason is. But what I would love to acknowledge is that the fear of Black people leads to death, and Black people not being human, right? Like, God, like, it's funny because, like, I hate talking about this. I talk about it all day I talk about 8 hours nonstop, but I kind of hate it because it's just kind of like, it's just been my life. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's been my whole life, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, you are Black, so you do deal with blackness all day, every day.
Somebody said that to me. Somebody said, some white guy was talking about stuff like that. And I was like, I've been Black my whole life, right? And it's like, it's funny, but it's like,
oh, it makes me think of Lethal Weapon 2. But you're Black.
right.
He's right. You're Black.
Right.
Again, another thing that some people aren't going to get. They're, what?
know.
Lethal Weapon 2? Not going to explain it. Just go watch it.
Someone's
Best movie ever.
Lethal Weapon, isn't that show with Damon Wayans?
Oh, God. Hate Hollywood so much.
Just a quick aside here. Lethal Weapon 1, Sanborn, Eric Clapton.
Yeah.
Fucking fantastic. I didn't even know that. I commented on Facebook once, like, God damn, the music. I was on TV, I was like, the music on this is fucking fantastic. So I was like, yeah, it's Eric Clapton and David Sanborn. I was like, that would be why. That shit is fucking dope, Anyway.
And quick, this has nothing to do with anything, but for anybody, Lethal Weapon 1, one of the rare movies where the theatrical cut is much better than the director's cut. I watched it once, like, ooh, Richard Donner gets to give his original vision. It's like, oh God, no, take those scenes back out. It just adds a couple scenes that are completely unnecessary, that like they wanted to, I guess, overdevelop the Riggs character. So they put in a couple scenes of him being crazy. And then whoever they said, no, you get that with the Christmas tree scene and the jumping off the roof scene. You don't need any more. We get it. And it really less is more.
The bullet, the gun in the mouth scene, all
kinds of exactly.
There's scenes that show he's insane.
Yeah.
Or just teetering on the edge of sanity.
And now we have to we have to get back to our conversation because I can talk about Lethal Weapon for 8 hours easily.
Right, exactly. Filibuster Lethal Weapon. but I really do. I don't like talking about this stuff because I feel like both sides. Not that there's more. Again, no false binaries here, right? Like, there's not two sides. There's 1,000, right? So I feel like much of the racism that I experienced as a child was external, but it became internal because it would happen at an age in which I would have believed in Santa Claus or the Easter.
Yeah, you absorb that shit. Yeah,
right, because you have no critical thinking skills until you're at least 9 or 10, but really puberty, I think, is when you actually start to get critical thinking skills, right? And so, like, you learn at a really young age how to behave, how to act, how to do this, look down, speak with your voice up, things, don't be threatening. You learn this stuff between 0 and 8, At least I did. I won't say all black people do, but many black men that I've talked to have learned this very lesson between 0 and 8.
Um,
And then it becomes internal, right? You
let
walk
me quick interrupt before I forget this. A story my mom told once or twice. Before she had me, or right after, or like we're talking years ago,
Mhm.
many years ago, when she was a young woman, she was in the South, and there was an elderly black man walking toward her on a sidewalk, and it was a small sidewalk. So she moved to get out of his way, and he stepped down off the sidewalk and walked around her. And then it took her a couple seconds, but then she said she started to cry because she realized, oh, he's doing this because if someone sees him stay on the sidewalk and doesn't defer to a white woman, he's getting his ass kicked. So
Here's a funny thing. It's funny you say that because I, right before the pandemic, we were in California, right? We were touring California, and we were staying at the drummer's house. Drummer lived in San Clemente because just basically Katie and I flew out there, and then we just picked up a band once we were out there, you know.
right.
And so we're staying at the drummer's house. He's a friend of ours. He lives in San Clemente, right by the beach. Beautiful place. Good lord, man. I think he paid like less than 1,500 for a 2-bedroom apartment. That's a 2-block walk to the beach, man. Good lord, my god, you know. But so I'd walk to the beach every morning. You know, I'd walk there every morning and just chill out and just hang out like 6:30 in the morning. I'd see like high school kids surfing before school. Fucking fascinating, right? Like, can you imagine that being a kid and getting up to go surf for an hour before you go to class? Like, oh, like I'm not a surfer, but dude, that's got to be awesome. Like,
I've only been surfing 5 times in my life, and it is fantastic. And it's one of those things where, yeah,
but just I mean,
I can see why you would get up and do that every day.
right, like, or just go and take your shoes off, roll your sweatpants up to your knees, and walk in the water and relax for an hour before you fucking catch the school bus or something. Jesus, man, like what an interesting thing, right? So anyway,
Goes back to what you and I have talked about in the weeks. Meditation. It's a form of
absolutely,
meditation. You're
absolutely.
getting away from everything and watching the sunrise, and just
And
as and I'm going to use a word here that's going to get me canceled. As gay as that sounds, you know,
an
it's a
asshole.
meditation. It's peaceful. It's getting away from technology.
You're just a knucklehead.
I had a joke a long time ago. I need to bring it back, that when I call something gay, I don't mean gay like two men having sex gay. I mean gay like the slang term, like silly and wrong, and it doesn't make any sense, like two men having sex.
Right,
You know,
I remember this
that
shit.
old joke.
Can't say that shit anymore.
Another sideways comment. Another sideways comment. I'm gonna get his name wrong. Are you familiar with Dan Turbisky?
I
He's a
don't.
podcaster. His podcasts are fantastic. He got podcasting fame for a podcast called, and I believe it was In Search of Richard Simmons.
Okay.
Um, I don't care anything about Richard Simmons, but it was a fantastic 6-part podcast, I believe. And he's done one called Running from Cops on the TV show Cops. Highly recommend it. He did one on the year Y2K, the crisis, the bug, the fear everybody was going to have. Again, fascinating. And he just has a new one where he's talking about um, the Navy SEAL that was on trial that Trump got involved. It was a big kerfuffle a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, probably 2 years ago. Anyway, the long short of it is he is a very gay man, and he's talking about reading. As he's investigating the Navy SEALs, he talks about being welcomed into their world and being shown text threads of how they talk to one another. And as he's describing, he's like, there's a lot of jokes, there's a lot of this. The word fag gets tossed around, the word fag gets tossed around like a hacky sack back and forth. And then he keeps going. But he doesn't, it's funny because he's a gay man, and he didn't get dwelling. He's like, they're using the word fag.
Oh,
Like he just says it because he gets it. Like he's like, look, I'm a gay man. They're Navy SEALs. They're the toughest of the tough. I don't think they hate gay people. They just call one another fag. It's what they do. And he it's just, and I miss that in life. Like, where I'm not saying you can use a slur and not mean it, but at the same time, it's not elevated to a 10, where it's everything like you use a slur or you to say something and suddenly you're canceled for life. Like, I've heard this, I don't know how accurate it is, but that if you go on Twitter and you refer to Caitlyn Jenner as Bruce Jenner, you get canceled because you're denying her who she is and all that stuff. Like, what if you fuck up? What if you're our age and you knew him as Bruce Jenner for your entire life and you just slip? But things like that, where anyway, I don't know what made me think of that, but just the idea that
I mean, my
we're
first.
back on the beach. You're on the beach. Back to the beach.
All right, so I'm walking back to the apartment, and there's two elderly white women, right? So I move out of their way. And I think, oh, that's nice. I'm getting out of these old women's way. Then two middle-aged white women they're jogging. Oh, let me get out of the way because they're jogging. Then young people. And I found myself getting out of every white person's way. And I was like, oh.
Regardless of age.
Right. And I would always have an excuse other than it's white. That would never be the reason, but it was only them who I did it to. And I was like, oh, see, that's some subconscious internal shit that was kind of downloaded into me as a child, like that old black dude.
Yeah.
Right? It's like the shit gets downloaded into you as a kid, because the reality of racism is that white people don't want to deal with it and they don't want to manage it. So what they really want is for black people to self-regulate. So you get all this stuff from the TV, from the this, from the that, all these things of how you're supposed to self-regulate when you walk into a room. And it's the same thing right now that white people are complaining about. I can't believe I have to walk into a room, and when I walk into a room, I've got to look around at everybody and try not to say something offensive and don't do this and don't do this. And I'm like, welcome to my whole life.
It's going all the way back to every man is a rapist. You would have to walk into a room and, okay, it's your job to make white people feel comfortable around you.
Right.
As opposed to white people just being comfortable around you.
Right, exactly. Right. Yeah. If it becomes my job to do that, and it's because of the inherent threat to my life, right? Because when white people, historically, I don't mean now, but historically, if a white person was made uncomfortable by a black person, that man, if it was a man, he could die. If it was a woman, there's little girls, they were killing boys, girls. Like,
we have a horrible fucking history, no denying it.
Like, and
not a great present, but one that's hopefully improving.
But here's the thing. If we don't, like, everybody keeps going, what's in the past, it's in the past.
Yeah.
I get it, right? Like, we cannot live in the past. We cannot, right? Like, as individuals, right? Like, if you look at your childhood and the shit that you learned between 0 and 8 is the shit that runs your life as an adult, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Except that that's most of us. Right? That's most everybody on the planet who hasn't gone through a 12-step program or therapy or some kind of deep intensive thing. You get the program downloaded into you when you're a young kid. You learn, right? Jordan Peterson's new book. I got it because Audible's begging me to come back. So they gave me 12 free credits. So I was like, all right, fuck it, I'll come back. Because it's like I get 24 credits for $99 or something. So it's like, it's like $4 a book. I'm like, all right, you got me.
Not too shabby.
You got me. So I got his new book, and he talks about why we need culture and society and things like that, and how you learn how to behave and how to do things and how to act from your family, what they approve of, what they disapprove of, what your immediate friend group and society and culture you live in immediately, and then the larger culture are what teach you how to behave. And so if you look at TV and black people are subservient, and then you look at your life as a child and like you watch you see stuff like that old black man move out of your way, right? As a young white kid, you think, oh, okay, right, black people move out of my way. I mean, that's not what you thought because your mom started crying and explained something to you. But like other people, like I've seen it. I've walked into a store and watched a mother pull her kids in close when I come by or hold her purse. I'm like, bitch, we're in a fucking supermarket. Where am I going with your purse? Right. So you think I'm going to steal your purse from the frozen food section, run all the way to the door, jump in my car, and leave my cart of groceries here that I can't get? You think the cart of groceries is a ploy for me to come purse snatching in a grocery store in broad daylight? Like, what the fuck are you thinking? But as a kid, if your mother pulls you in close every time a black person moves by. You don't know that You just go, oh, mommy's afraid, so I'm afraid. And it just gets downloaded into you, fear of black people. It's just how it happens. And the same thing happens for me, right? I walk by, people become afraid of me. I see that. And then I go, oh, let me do something to make them not be afraid of me. Or whatever it is, right? I can get angry, be like, fuck you, cunt. Like, whatever, you're an asshole and a bitch. You're teaching your kids to fear black people, and you're an asshole, right? But then she does have a reason to be afraid of me because I'm like actually being.
Well, that's why you say this is not binary.
Right.
There are so many.
Dude,
this is what everyone calls 4D chess. I mean, it's
right.
every move is fucking
It's
weighted down.
complex. And just because the solution is easy doesn't mean it's simple, right? The solution is we grow up and we stop doing this, right? Like as an individual, what we were talking about a week or so ago, right? Start being responsible and accountable for your own actions. But that's not just a thing you say to people, like, well, these black people need to be responsible for their actions. Right, but so do the cops, right?
Yeah, yeah.
These, when there's white people running and storming the Capitol and somebody gets killed, it's like she needed to be responsible. But even not that, the people around her needed to be responsible. But like, I will say this. Well, here's a funny thing. Let's go back again. Fucking nonsense.
I don't even know where we are anymore. I don't think there's been anything linear.
Nah, not even. It's.
Yeah. But I'm holding on to one thought. So where is this one going? So we don't get too sidetracked because you said something a minute ago.
Like I stopped moving out of the way of anybody. Like I just started walk. Like if I am on the right side of the sidewalk, right, and they're walking 2 by 2, right, towards me on the right and left side, I do not move anymore. No matter
who it is. And there's a difference between everybody making space for each other and, say, you throwing shoulders.
Right, absolutely. What I have found is that people of color always just, if you're walking 2 by 2, somebody steps behind someone because they're on the wrong side of the road, essentially, right?
Yeah.
They're on the wrong side of the sidewalk. So somebody steps in front or somebody steps behind and you single file down and you go to, that's just what happens every time it's people of color. That's what I have experienced. When it's white people, it's like, we do this. And then at the last minute they go, oh, and they move. And go, oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
Yeah.
And I don't even think they're lying. I think that like there's a filter in certain, I won't say all, but in certain white people's minds that like because black people are generally the ones who self-regulate ourselves, right? In a room full of white people, in a white person, in a white environment, we self-regulate. I won't say we.
Right, but to be fair to white people, they probably were looking at their phone and didn't see you.
Right, exactly. Right. And they're looking at pictures of the person who used to be Bruce Jenner.
I should not tell this story unless I look it up because I don't know if it's true.
Yes.
I heard.
No, just real quick. This is
that?
White shit here, though. This is a fucking smoothie. This is some white shit. I'm kidding. It's black shit. This is like, got my life.
Black shit if it's blended collard greens. The story I heard is about Michelle Obama giving an interview where you're saying you were invisible to them, and that's what made me think of the story. Is she was walking the dog? I can't think of the White House dog's name. Do you remember it?
Nope.
Anyway, and she said she came across some people and they just ignored her. They were petting the dog and like, oh, look at the dog, and like she's like, I felt like such a non-person, and she tried. From what I heard, she thought it was race related, and I'm like, no. If there's any at all interaction with a person and a dog, I'd much rather talk to the dog. I don't care who the person is.
Yeah, that's a white thing though.
Yeah, okay, but I'm just saying it doesn't have to be a racist thing just to treat anyone like it could be goddamn the hottest chick in the world. I probably take a passing glance at her, but I'm going to get in there and look at the doggy and, scruff his bad ears and, touch his nose and, like, so I just thought that was interesting that she felt like a non-person. I'm like, yeah, but you are going up against a dog and dogs are, you got to get in there and
right. And a cute with it that like, come on.
Exactly.
Oh, but let's segue into the into what is the problem with this, right? Because as much as I can say all the stuff that I said about racism, and we can talk about gender, and I'll say the same things. Listen, I think that like if men would deal with the things that were actually sexism, we wouldn't have to worry about some guy at a bar offering to buy a girl a drink, a woman a drink, right? Because that to me might not be sexism. It might be an unwanted advance, but
Right.
that's also how we meet. That's also how people meet in the in
Exactly. Like
don't
everything that
that's
you
what
and
we
I
do,
did
right?
to
Like
talk
you
to women is
walk up to a
considered,
strange person and you say hello. It's what musicians do.
yeah.
It's what athletes do. Like if I'm walking, I see some dude with an instrument, I'm like, hey man, how you doing? And I introduce myself and I go, hey, can I buy you a drink? Let's get to know each other. Like it's not sex. It's just it's what we do to things. It's the way you break the ice with something that you want in your world, right?
Well, it's the way we did now, and I'm not passing judgment here. I'm not saying, oh, kids these days, but they have been, and I try to say this without judgment, they've been sheltered so much that they use apps to date because there's a safety in, let me scope this other person out. With guys, it's generally, is this chick hot? But women get a sense of who the guy is, and before they decide to
Yeah.
swipe right or left or whatever it is, they get to use apps to feel safety. There is distance, so that way today if someone talks to them, it's
Yeah.
sort of like, why the fuck is this person talking to me?
Yeah, there's
I'm
distance.
being attacked, I feel threatened.
Right, there's distance, so we can all send each other pictures of our dicks and tits and asses and
Yeah.
vaginas and everything else because there's distance. It's like, right, got it. It's fucking
What's the
weird.
joke? I can't remember. The comedian is like, to send a dick pic in my day, you'd have to get the camera, you have to click, you'd have to get it developed, you have to put it in the mail, you'd have to know their address.
Yeah, fucking nightmare. But I think that I think that if white people dealt with the parts of white culture that are known to be racist, right? Like if white people just dealt with the stuff that is actually racist, I think that every interaction that goes negative with black people and white people wouldn't be considered racist, right? Not even just white people. It's not like only white people are
Right.
racist, right? Because that's
Well,
right.
and
This
do you
is
think
not,
that's where we are to point now and hopefully moving forward? Because I think
not
that's what this kerfuffle is maybe it's a seismic change, and that's why it's
I
so
don't. I
fucked
think
up
that
right now.
I think everyone's going to dig their heels down, and I
Mm.
think so. So I think that like
I
the
think older people are going to dig their heels down, but I don't think the younger
I
generations.
don't think the younger generation has heels to dig down. They
Okay,
don't
that
care
makes sense.
the same way, but they also don't run shit. Like the baby boomers refuse to give up. They refuse. They literally refuse.
Yeah, but wouldn't you if you had power?
Right, but but like they refuse. Like they literally like, nope, we're gonna have 90-year-old presidents next. It's just like, come
Probably.
on, man. Like, what the fuck is going on here?
Well, let me because we're running out of time.
Yes, sir.
I do want to talk about one thing, and maybe it's too late to bring this up because it could be an entire subject for an entire hour. I have no idea. But if there's one thing I do not like about, I would say, I guess the younger generation and or the kerfuffle we're in, is that, and you and I have touched on this before, it's that the idea that America invented racism. I mean, this is our country and we need to deal with it here. But I think I sent you an article a couple of weeks back about how black people were being treated horribly in Mexico. It's like, oh, Mexico, Hispanic on black racism. And as we've talked about in the past, Japanese people think they're superior to Chinese people, think they're, Koreans think like people thinking they're superior. Like with coronavirus, I heard a series of stories from China where they're like, "Oh, that's the Americans' fault. They brought it over here and dropped it off," and they genuinely believe that, and they think that Americans are a bunch of shifty, assholes who it's beyond their mind to think that it could have been a bat
Well,
human transfer.
it's just
So
these
I
people
think what the
are
younger generation does right now is they think America's the worst, which it is for them because it's all we see. But humans treating each other like shit, it's a worldwide phenomena. I mean, it just
absolutely,
is.
absolutely. I would say
We just have to own up to our own shit. We have to acknowledge our past
right,
and
but
use it as a platform to do better in the future.
it's the thing, man. Who actually knows history, right? right? Like who
Old
actually,
people? I don't know.
right? But I mean, like at the end of the day,
History is written by the victors.
but not always. I mean,
No,
it
I
is
know. That
always,
was the first quote that popped in
no,
my
but I
head.
mean, it
Orwell.
is always,
Was that Orwell?
but there's always another narrative if you look.
Yeah,
Right?
the People's History by Zinn, as opposed to the history books we
I'm
read
just
in
saying,
class.
like
Lies my teachers told me. Lies my teacher taught me. Lies my teacher told me. Whatever that book.
but I
Yeah,
mean, but listen, you can go find W.E.B. Du Bois, Paul Robeson, James Baldwin, but I mean, like you can get historical accounts from Native Americans who learned to read and write English because they were forced to go to some school
yeah. No, absolutely.
their name, and then they wrote historical accounts of what that is. We just don't read those. We
This
don't
is
look
true.
at that. So we only know history from one perspective, which isn't actually history. It's part of history. But what I find fascinating is that while all this stuff is true and we need to deal with our stuff, you have the Sharon Osbourne, Piers Morgan thing. That's completely absurd. It's completely absurd. And when white people say things like people are being racist against us, now they're not 100% wrong, right? They're not 100% wrong. I wouldn't take it as strongly as they take it, but they're not 100% wrong. The problem is, and you and I've talked about this before, like on one of our very first podcasts, right? Like year ago, 2 years, whatever we started when I was just subbing for Jake, and we would, you know, well, I was gonna say something fucked up about it, but
You mean when he was hungover or passed out?
I was like, when he was a little,
Yeah. No, he knows he's an alcoholic. I made fun of him for it this last week on the Idiots podcast.
oh man, hold on, my light fell.
That's all right. We should start rapping any
But,
second. Otherwise, people are gonna be like, okay, it's been an hour, fuck faces.
but I do think that the Sharon Osbourne thing and the Piers Morgan thing, all that stuff, I think that's too far. I think we
Well,
can't live in a
what you're talking about, if from my perspective, from what I understand, that it is, people aren't allowed to have disagreements anymore. It's literally one side or that's it.
right,
And
absolutely.
Piers Morgan may be an asshole, but he is allowed to say, I don't agree with Meghan Markle. And Sharon Osbourne
He
may be
just
a
said,
horrible person. I don't know, but she's allowed to say, you know what? I don't support Piers, but he's my friend and he's not being racist when he says that. And so to
because
immediately
he's
label Piers a racist because he doesn't agree with someone, like, I think they said, why does it have to be because she's black? What if he just doesn't like her? And it goes back to what you said.
right,
Maybe
exactly.
people sometimes are just assholes and skin color or gender or has nothing to do with it. It's just people don't like certain people. Who
Watched
knows?
Piers Morgan several times be a douchebag to people, and I'm like, yeah, kind of a dick. I don't always disagree with him. He's a bit like Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson's like, listen, I'll call you whatever the fuck you want me to call you. I just don't think it should be a law.
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, I will call whatever you identify as, that's great. But if I fuck up and say, hey, dude, it should not be the end of the world.
Right, exactly. Right.
And that's, we have a segment of society that is so woke that if you, like, I was watching, I think it was, I can't remember. You see it all the time in movies where a group of girls are like, hey guys, what's up? And like there are people that would be offended by that now, like, how dare you, it's like,
Right. Yeah, I think that's ridiculous. I do think, though, I can't speak for Piers Morgan and Sharon Osbourne because they're Brits, right? So, like, I can't speak for what goes on over there. Like, I know Sharon's show is over here,
yeah.
but they're not, they're Brits, right? So, like, culturally speaking, they're not us. So I don't understand why. I don't understand why the racism thing there is such a big. I know that racism exists in England, but it's not like it is here. It just isn't. It's
Well,
not the same thing, right?
yeah,
So
I
like,
can't speak for them either. I just know that what little I know about Piers is he's absurd. Like he's a
oh,
royalist,
yeah,
and as an American, I'm like, really, you're all up into kings and queens and that shit. And
yeah,
I boggles my goddamn mind.
right. I mean, yeah, it's like complete silliness. Here's the thing. The,
Final point by Antar Goodwin.
right, exactly. The modern version of woke people is not significantly different than the old version of a white racist, right? It's like if you were a black person and you spoke out of turn, you got canceled. That might have been lynching, killing, but it
Yeah.
surely meant firing, right? And if one of your friends, like if you worked at a factory and somebody overheard you saying something about the boss and you were black, you get fired. And if some black dude stuck up for you, he get fired too, right?
Yeah.
It's so when you are culturally trained that this group of people is superior and this is how they were behaving while they were telling everybody they were superior, and then telling everybody, like I heard it tons growing up, well, you're not like other black people because you speak well and you do this and you like the Beatles and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, oh, right. So if I do quote unquote white stuff, I'm better than these other black people, right? Like it was a way for me to be better than black
Yeah, until you fuck up like OJ did, and then you get canceled
right.
out of
And
white
you're
culture.
like, oh, snap. No,
Yeah.
you just a nigga again. You know
Yeah,
what I
and then
mean?
you are
Right.
gone.
Or black again. But I feel like if we understood our history from a cultural standpoint, we would understand that this is just the fruit of kind of a white supremacist ethic that lived for a long time where everybody's goal was to be a powerful white man, right? Like that's whatever, like
That's my goal. I've been failing at it so far, but
that's
I'd
also
like to be a powerful white person.
like I don't even, oh God, like this is such like touchy stuff, right? Like, but I do
Well,
like,
let's save it for next week then.
yeah, well, we talk about it off air. But I do feel like what we're dealing with the modern woke people is not drastically different than what was going on 100 years ago in this country towards black people. I don't think that makes it right,
Yeah.
but I do understand why it's happening because it's what Malcolm said, the chickens are going to come home to roost.
It's like, the swinging of the pendulum, and we are at an extreme, and we just have to hope that it slips back to center.
Put an end to it realistically and reasonably years and years and years ago, and then done a real education program and showed not just black people as slaves in history, but huge contributions,
yeah,
and didn't make it like this thing, then we wouldn't be dealing with this stuff today. And that's the issue but I don't want the pendulum to fall so far back that like all I have to do to get a white dude arrested is be like, he hit me, and then nobody's gonna believe him and everybody's gonna believe me because I'm black. Like that's not okay either. Do you know what I mean?
We're all working toward the center, hopefully.
This is what I say all the time. We're just human beings trying to figure it out. We're just trying to figure this the fuck out. Like nobody's figured it out. We're just all humans doing our best.
And it's going to be that way for a long time. The thing is,
like that forever.
When you get, you get older and you realize this shit's been ongoing and it has peaks and valleys, and young people don't understand that yet. They just see now, anger, change.
Absolutely.
And change happens, but it happens incrementally. And for better or worse. All right. Yeah. AntarGoodwin.com, KatieHenryMusic.com, NathanTimmel.com.
Hey, don't look out.
And guess what? My website's been changed. So if you just go to NathanTimmel.com, the book is right there, and you click a button, and so I don't have to say go look for it on Amazon. We Are 100, all that. I'll put a banner up, but it's like, if you just go to NathanTimmel.com, everything's there now. All right, my friend. Good seeing your face. Good talking to you.
Yeah, yours as well, man. Yeah.
All right. Anybody that watched, hit the share button, hit the like button, and comment, and we will comment back for the most part. Sometimes, not always.
Yeah.